You always talk about like the countries that are known for certain exports, right? Like China's really known for manufactured goods. And you think of Middle Eastern countries and you think of oil.
Right.
But where does India fit into all of this? What are they really known for exporting on the world stage?
That's a really good question. When you think about it, India might not be the first country you think about when you're thinking about like, huge exports or anything. But there is something that's kind of surprising that they're really good at.
Okay.
And it's these digitally delivered services.
Digitally delivered services. I am intrigued.
Yeah.
What exactly are those?
Okay.
And how is that different from just exporting goods like we normally think of?
So there's three main types of exports.
Okay.
And so you've got your goods export, which is like just a simple, tangible, item that's shipped across borders.
Right.
So
like Scotch whiskey being shipped from Scotland to India?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like Scotch whiskey going from Scotland to India.
Yeah.
So that's like your traditional trade that everyone thinks of.
Right, just your physical products.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And then there's traditional service exports.
Okay.
And this is where the service provider has to actually be there in person.
Okay.
So let's say, a U.S. company needs to like set up a really complex piece of machinery that they bought from a company in Taiwan.
Right.
They might have Taiwanese consultants fly over to the U.S. and help them get everything set up.
Yeah.
That's a traditional service export because
It's a service.
it's a service.
But they have to travel.
But they have to be there physically present.
Okay.
Right. And then digitally delivered services.
That's where you don't have to be there.
Exactly. You're providing a service, but you're doing it remotely.
Okay.
So you can think of those same Taiwanese consultants, instead of flying all the way over to the U.S., they could just use like video conferencing or some other digital tools to help the U.S. company remotely.
Right. So that's digitally delivered service export.
Exactly. And this is where India is really kind of making a name for themselves in the global market.
That's really interesting. So they're kind of known for, providing these services using technology and doing it all remotely. But what makes this so significant? Like, why is this such a big deal?
Well, I think what's interesting is, globally, when you look at it, digitally delivered services are still a smaller portion of total exports.
Right.
Compared to, physical goods.
Yeah.
But if you think about technology and how it's evolving, all this stuff with cloud computing, artificial intelligence, even like the rise in remote work, all of these are really pointing towards a huge increase in the demand for services that can be delivered digitally.
Oh, so it's like they're ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And they're focusing on a sector that we can only imagine is going to grow like crazy in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, we're talking about a developing nation here.
Right.
They're competing with like these huge established economic powerhouses.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty remarkable in itself.
This is really interesting. But before we get into how well India is actually doing in this sector, can we maybe just talk about what exactly are the types of digitally delivered services they're providing?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Like, what are they actually exporting?
It's not just about being able to work remotely, right?
Right.
It's about what specific skills and services India is actually offering the world.
Right.
And that's what you're going to kind of explore next.
Great. Let's get into that.
Okay, so let's talk about what India is actually exporting when it comes to this digital stuff.
Okay.
A big part of it is these IT services.
Okay.
So think like software development, consulting, technical support, all that kind of behind-the-scenes stuff that keeps businesses running.
So like all the brains behind websites, we use the apps on our phones, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. India has a ton of really skilled IT professionals, right? And they're using those skills to provide these services to companies literally all over the world.
Makes sense.
And it's not just limited to big tech companies. We're talking healthcare, finance, education, you name it.
Yeah.
Pretty much any industry relies on these digitally delivered services from India in some way.
So it makes sense that they've kind of, solidified themselves as a tech hub.
Right.
But is it just IT? Or are there other types of digitally delivered services that they're really known for?
Definitely not just IT. Another big area is what's called business process outsourcing, or BPO.
BPO.
Yeah, and this covers a huge range of tasks.
Okay.
Things like customer service, data entry, accounting, back office operations.
So basically anything that a business needs to do but can be done remotely.
Exactly. So like when you call a company's helpline and you end up talking to someone in India, that's actually a digitally delivered service export in action.
Wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, it's happened all the time. And it's not just like call centers anymore.
Right.
It's evolved to include things like online chat support, social media management, even virtual assistants.
It's so interesting to think about
It really is.
how much of that is happening without us really even realizing it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's all about providing these efficient and cost-effective solutions for businesses. It doesn't matter where they are in the world.
Right, because it's all remote.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is all super interesting.
Yeah.
But how does India's performance in this whole digitally delivered services sector actually compare to their traditional exports?
Right.
Like, how does it stack up against something like their manufactured goods?
That's the key question. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
So back in 2023, global goods exports were valued at something like $24 trillion.
Wow.
Yeah, huge number.
That's a lot.
And China was leading the way there.
Right.
But India's share of all those traditional goods exports was only about 1.8%.
Okay, so not a huge player when it comes to the goods export market.
Right.
But what about those digitally delivered services?
Now, this is where the numbers really show how strategic this move into digital has been for India.
Okay.
In that same year, the global value of digitally delivered services was over $4 trillion.
Okay.
And get this, India had a 6% share of that market.
Wow. 6%.
Yeah.
That's more than triple their share in goods exports.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
It really shows that they're not just trying to compete, in those traditional manufacturing sectors. They're really leveraging those strengths in technology and their skilled labor to really excel in this digital arena.
This is honestly eye-opening.
Yeah.
We started out by wondering, where does India fit in when it comes to global exports?
Right.
And now it's like, whoa, they're kind of leading the way in this whole new digital world.
They really are.
But what does that mean for them going forward? What does this success actually mean for India in the long run?
That's a great question, and that's what we'll dive into next.
It's pretty amazing how India is using technology.
Yeah.
And, they have such a skilled workforce to really make a name for themselves in this sector that's growing so fast. But are there any challenges that they might run into that could, make it hard to keep up this success?
Yeah. I mean, for sure, there are definitely some hurdles that they need to kind of navigate as they keep moving forward in this digitally delivered services area.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest ones is infrastructure.
Okay.
They really need to have strong, reliable internet access across the entire country, not just in the big cities.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If everything's digital, you got to have that strong internet backbone.
Exactly.
What else do you think they should be thinking about?
Well, another really important thing is education and skills development. I mean, the need for people with tech skills is just going to keep growing.
Right.
So India has to invest in those training programs that are going to give their workforce the skills they need for these digital jobs.
Yeah. It's not just about having a lot of people.
Right.
It's about having people with the right skills.
Exactly.
To actually do the work.
Yeah.
Are there any other challenges that you see popping up?
Well, competition is always a factor in the global market.
Right.
Other countries are starting to see how much potential there is in these digitally delivered services.
Yeah.
So India needs to kind of stay ahead of everyone else when it comes to being innovative and providing top-notch quality.
Right.
They can't just rest on their laurels. They got to keep looking for ways to add value and stand out from the crowd.
So it sounds like India has a real shot at becoming a global leader in this whole thing. But they got to be smart about it.
Yeah, they got to be strategic about tackling these challenges.
This has been a really incredible deep dive.
Yeah.
We started with this simple question. Where does India fit in when it comes to global exports? And we ended up uncovering this whole fascinating world of digitally delivered services.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it really makes you realize just how much technology is changing the global economy.
Yeah, and in such a big way.
You always think about globalization in terms of physical goods moving around. But maybe the future is going to be much more digital.
I think so.
With all these services just being traded across borders without anyone even having to travel.
Yeah, no more planes, no more boats, just digital connections.
Exactly. It's mind-blowing.
It really is.
Makes you wonder, what other changes are happening right now
that
we haven't even noticed yet.
Right. What seems small now, but could be the next big thing.
Exactly. Maybe one of our listeners will be the one to spot it.
Maybe.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.
It's been fun.
We'll be back next time to explore something else unexpected.